So our theme for this year's summit, our 5th annual one, if you can believe that, is Rightsizing California for New Growth and Opportunities. And, you know, as we've continued our coverage of food and ag issues in the Golden State, it's clear that there are a lot of very recurring themes, especially in the stories that Brad Hooker has been writing for y'all. For example, water, labor, regulatory challenges. I hate to sound like a broken record, but those come up in a lot of our different stories. These things sometimes drive up the cost of production and make it seem almost unworkable for some growers to stay in business. But we've also seen a very impressive ability for those growers, shippers, food processors, agribusinesses to keep adapting or right-sizing their operations to take advantage of some of the new technology, the efficiencies, and become more resilient, as Karen Ross, the Secretary of Agriculture, will be sharing with you later. Sometimes this involves new practices and even some new crops. So for this year's summit, we wanted to investigate these topics and bring together leading experts to learn more about what's happening now, what might be on the horizon, and we also invited some people who might not always be in our communities, some representatives of some environmental organizations who you might not hear from very often in ag communities, and perhaps you might not like what they're going to say, but we thought it was important to hear their voices. At least we've got them at the table and having a dialogue. Last but not least, we're going to finish up today with a look at what we learned from our Great Tomato Challenge. Some of you may know I love to garden, and I especially love to have fresh, ripe tomatoes in the summertime. So I thought it might be fun to see if the people who create laws for this state could also grow tomatoes. And we, thanks to Senator Melissa Hurtado and Jenny Maloney at Bear, have been very fortunate to launch a competition on Earth Day in which we ask members and their staff to see if they would pick up an early girl variety tomato and see who by the Wednesday of last week could have the best looking tomato plant. A couple of them didn't make it that far, and we're not going to unveil their names, but we did have quite a few who did, and we'll be announcing the winner in our very last session today. And I think you'll find it very interesting, including those who named their tomato plant, some who played music to help their tomato plant grow, a couple who used some fertilizer, and so we've got their stories to tell. Before we begin our sessions, I've got a few housekeeping things to start out with. We encourage you to join the conversation on social media today using the hashtag #FoodandAg24. It's also on your placemats on your tables. Throughout the day, our moderators will be introducing our speakers, but we're not going to give you their full biographies. Those are all online, so we encourage you to review their backgrounds and full biographies by visiting bit.ly/foodandag24. That's bit.ly/foodandag24. Or you can scan the QR code that should be up here on the slide in just a little bit. For in-person attendees, this information is also found on those tabletop things on each of your respective tables. Please silence your cell phones and make sure we don't have any other notifications interrupting our discussions. And last but not least, we wanted to let you know that we are recording all these conversations, and they'll be available on our website, agri-pulse.com, in a few days. So to start us off, I'm going to round up some trivia to test out our Slido, which we will be using for questions. To open up Slido, simply open your web browser, any device will do, and visit slido.com. You enter the event code, #FoodandAg24, and that'll get you started. Or again, you can scan the QR code on your table. There's no need to download anything or open up a separate app. But once you're in, you'll start to see our polling question. So we're going to start with just a couple to get your juices flowing. And our first test is to give me one word, just one word. If you could describe California food and agriculture in one word, what would it be? And we'll see what kind of a word cloud we're going to generate here. Trouble, bountiful, diverse, unique. I saw Mark Linder here. Did you enter bountiful? Resilient. Challenged and challenging came up a couple times. Amazing. A few more: adaptable, investment, political. We'll have to take a picture of this so we can remember it for a little later. But there's a lot of words, local, coming in. Thank you for that. I'm going to try a couple more, just get a sense of the crowd here today. For another Slido question, what do you think is the biggest threat to successful food production in the state of California? Regulations is coming up strong. Policy, cost of production, water. The California legislature made it. Bureaucrats. Energy. It looks like the leaders are regulations, policy, water. We got climate change. Somebody else is adding in here. You know, that's the regulations being at the top is not surprising in California. And actually, every time Agri-Pulse has done research with growers across the country, regulatory burdens is usually the top thing that surfaces. So we know that that's a concern. Last but not least, let's do one more. What do you think is the biggest opportunity to make food production more profitable in the Golden State? So what's the biggest opportunity? Agave. Gosh, who would have mentioned that? More than one person, apparently. It's like technology is really a big solution for a lot of folks. Workforce development, I see. Regulatory reform. Desalinization. Lots of good answers here. Automation and adaptation. Education. Export rearrangement. Well, thank you for all those. We've got ability to capture those, so we'll make sure and include those in our reporting on the conference. And please keep your Slido and your apps handy, so we'll be asking you to enter your questions for each of our panelists and our presenters using Slido today. So now I'd like to welcome our first guest to the stage and turn your attention to a very important part of our program, and that is our sponsors. So as Roland and if you want to come on up, Roland and Allie, we'll get you seated up here. But our sponsors are a very important part of making our summit possible. And so we'd like to have you turn your attention to the screen and thank Western Growers for sponsoring our event.
The Wolf Farming Company got started in 1974 by my parents, Jack and Bernice Wolf. We've been supporters of Western Growers for the last 25 years because they've been involved in so many of the issues that are important to us. Western Growers has had quite an impact on our operation as well as many of our neighbors. They're set up to really meet the needs of the fresh produce industry in the Western U.S. And they're focused on issues and policy items that, quite frankly, impact all of agriculture. So that involves immigration, other labor-related issues, water rights, a whole host of things. Going forward, our challenges are only going to grow. We're going to need a good, strong, trusted voice. Quite frankly, Western Growers is that voice. Western Growers has been there for us time and time again, when and where we've needed them most. And I fully expect them to be there in the future for growers like me and you.